Yeah, I can't hear myself, so I gotta make sure. So, before we start, I want to ask a question to everybody, and don't raise your hands for it. I don't want anybody to incriminate themselves, but you kind of give me the subtle nod, just let me know. Who here in this room has ever done something that hurt somebody else, or that they knew was bad for society as a whole, but they did it anyways because it benefited them? Well, thank you, Sarah. Well, for me, for a long time, that was my day-to-day existence. Growing up, I had a bad addiction to cocaine, I had a bad addiction to alcohol, and so I would steal money to support my habits. I would steal food because I didn't have any money, because I'd already spent it on drugs. And that went on for years and years, and I looked around my world and I said, this place sucks. Why is the world such a crappy place? And I realized at one point that my world sucks because I make it suck. I do bad things, and that's why bad things are happening around me. So I said, you know what? I've got to change it. I've got to turn everything around. But how am I going to do it? Well, when I was growing up, I was always taught, my generation's always told, you can be anything you want. You can do anything you want in the world as long as you put your mind to it and work hard to achieve it. So I decided 8 years ago, I'm going to be a superhero. Now, unfortunately, just genetically, it wasn't, really well thought out then, From my parents, I got green eyes, I got a receding hairline, but I didn't get laser vision. I didn't get super speed or anything like that. So I had to think, what is a superhero? And I realized that a superhero isn't defined by the powers that they have, but they're defined by what they do with those powers. It's their actions, not their costume, not their awesome laser vision that makes them a superhero. So I said, okay, well, what are the qualities of a superhero? Well, a superhero has to stop the bad guys. So I decided that I'm going to go out on the streets and do community crime prevention. I go out 3 nights a week, and I just, I look out for things happening in high crime areas, and I try to stop them. A superhero has to stand up for the little guy, people who can't defend themselves. So I became an advocate for the homeless. I work with a lot of the shelters here in the cities. I work with a lot of the people living on the streets just to make sure that they can get through the night and try to transition them into a better life. But more importantly than that, probably the most important thing about a superhero is that a superhero shows people that the world can be a better place and that they can help save their own world. So that's where we're at today. I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit. My talk is called How to Save the World in 7 Billion Easy Steps. And I know it sounds like a lot, but what you have to remember is it's not about you doing 7 billion things. It's about 7 billion people doing one single thing. So to start it off, let's ask the question of, what is helping? The dictionary defines helping as performing an action that makes it easier for a problem to be solved. That's pretty easy to understand. So the more important question is, how does helping work? How does the helping action come into being? And I've put a lot of thought into it, and I broke it down into basically 4 components. You have to identify a problem. You have to identify the solution to the problem, or the steps you have to take to get there. And then there's the 2 tricky parts. You have to identify what you're capable of to solve the problem. If your problem involves, to use a superhero example, if you have to get up to the top of a building and save a cat, are you able to climb that building? And then the 4th thing is you have to ask yourself, what are you willing to do to solve the problem? Because any action of helping comes with a risk. You have to generally give up something, whether it's large or small, in order to give the helping action. So, you know that the local homeless shelter needs volunteers on Saturday. Are you willing to give up your Saturday? Or, are you going to decide that you'll find another way to do it? And so those kind of things all come together. Once you recognize those 4 components, they come together and you have your course of action to help. But without all 4 of those components, generally the helping action kind of collapses on itself. If you take away your willingness to help, you're not going to help. If you look at a problem and say, that's too big for me, I'm not capable of doing that, then you're not going to try to do it. But what you have to understand is that every problem can be solved. There's no such thing as an impossible problem. It's just how you look at the problem and your perspective when you get into it. So when you're dealing with a big social problem, you have to do a little thing called eating. Oh wait, I'm going to skip that slide because I just talked about it. You have to talk about eating the elephant. Now, who here is familiar with the phrase, how can you eat an elephant? Anyone? I can see a couple people here. That's an old turn of phrase that the only way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. So you can look at your problem and it can be this big, nasty looking guy here, and you'll say, there's no way I could eat that. But if you cut it up into small pieces, and you take one piece at a time and focus on that, as you progress and you eat one little bite at a time, that problem gets smaller and smaller and becomes easier and easier to manage. So you may not be able to completely solve homelessness by yourself, but you could help one homeless person and you could show other people how to do the same thing. And the good thing about eating the elephant is that as you eat the elephant, you start to understand that the elephant, it really tastes pretty good. And you keep wanting more and more. It makes you feel good to help people. So as you keep doing it, you just want to keep going and you want to help people more and more and more. And as you do that, the problem becomes smaller and smaller. But it's still an elephant. And an elephant's still very big, and it's a big undertaking to eat it. So how do we make it easier? We get help from other people. You're helping, so why shouldn't other people help? Because one person can eat an elephant, but it would take you probably a couple days at least, and by the time you're done, you're not going to want to eat another elephant. But if 100 people all start chipping in, everybody grabs their forks and knives and they start eating this elephant, that elephant's gone like that. And everybody the next day can wake up and do the same thing. Now, I liken it to a very real-world problem of moving from one house to another house. Everybody here has probably done that at some point in time in their lives. So let's say you have a couch, and you know you have to move this couch out of your living room, downstairs, get it into your moving truck. One person can do that by themselves. You grab one into the couch and you drag it. But by the time you get it downstairs, by the time you get it outside, by the time you get it in the truck, you're tired. It took you all day to do this, and you don't want to go in there and move the bookshelf now. So what do you do when you're moving? Of course, you call your friends. You say, hey, come help me move. I'll get you some beer and some pizza, and we'll get this thing done today. Because two people moving a couch, one person picks up one end, the other person picks up the other end, and it takes the load for each person, cuts it in half. It takes the amount of time that it takes to move the couch, cuts it in half, and it takes the amount of effort required for everybody and cuts it in half. And the more people you add to this task, the easier and easier it becomes for everybody, and the smaller the effort required is. But eventually you get to a point where only so many people can, you only need so many people to pick up the couch. So you have 5 people now, 4 people can carry the couch, but what's that 5th person going to do? Well, clearly they're going to, help navigate the couch through the hallways. They're going to, help it stay balanced so it doesn't tip over, things like that. And in the end, you get the couch outside. Everybody feels like, I hardly did anything. We had so many people helping that was easy. And, it's not a big deal at all. But you have to ask yourself, who in that situation did the more important work? Was the person who picked up the couch more important than the person who helped navigate through the hallway? And the answer is no, because without every person working in that equation, the problem becomes harder and harder to solve. So you have to look at, when it comes to solving problems, anything that you do to try and improve the world, anything that you do, whether you're picking up litter, whether you're helping the homeless, whether you're trying to prevent crime, anything that you're doing is making a big impact in the world. It may seem like a small thing for you because it's not taking a lot of effort to do a small task. But the more people that perform small tasks, the less of a problem there is as an overall problems in society. Losing my train of thought here real quick. Boom. So let's look at these two folks. This down here in the bottom is Beverly Knight. She lives in Antioch, California. And every morning she wakes up and she goes out to a local park, cleans up all the litter. The group above is Occupy Our Homes here in Atlanta, Georgia. What they do is they go to people who are facing foreclosure on their houses, and they try to work with the banks and try to get the banks to give these people time. Maybe you just lost your job, you can't afford to pay your mortgage, you're going to get kicked out. They go and they try to fight for you to keep you in your house. And it's two completely different ways of helping, but in the end, they both benefit society in a great way. Beverly down here, she keeps her streets clean for the animals, for the children that live and play in that park. And Occupy Our Homes, they do a great job of helping to reduce poverty in the city of Atlanta. They keep people in their homes so that we don't have to have people on the streets, needing the support of the cities. So the big question, and this is the one thing that always kind of keeps people from trying to help, is what's in it for you? I could help, I can give up my Saturday, but that person's going to be better off, but what's in it for me? And that drives a lot of people to decide not to help. The concept of selfishness, and people feel bad about it, but I'm here to tell you that you don't have to feel bad about being selfish, because the concept of altruism, of helping someone and getting nothing in return, doesn't exist. It doesn't exist at all, because every time you help, you're going to get some form of benefit from it. Whether it's just benefit of it making you feel good, or if you say, a good example is joining a group like Back on My Feet here in Atlanta, which is a running club for the homeless. You go out and you run with these guys, and you get the benefit of helping them, but also the benefit of helping yourself get in better physical shape, just get better motivated into your days. So if you can find a way to help someone, if you can find a way to help someone while helping yourself, then it's a great thing. You can reap great benefit from doing good actions, and you should never feel bad about yourself by saying, I don't want to do this unless there's some kind of reward coming back to me, because in the end, it's all just about helping. And if you're helping someone else and helping yourself at the same time, that's two people being helped in that day. And overall, it adds up to make a better society. So, we'll end off on a little quote here. This is kind of my personal mantra that I use every day when I go out. And I always tell myself, if you want to save the world, all you have to do is save the world. All you have to do is say, this is what I'm going to do, and go out and do it. And people are going to tell you that you can't do it. People are going to say, that problem is too big. You can't solve that problem. But I guarantee you that those are the same people that have never tasted an elephant. And those are the same people whose couch is going to stay in the same room for the rest of their lives. You guys have immense power within yourselves to create big change. All you have to do is recognize that about yourselves, choose a course of action, and go out and be your own superhero. Thank you guys very much.